Extremely delayed product portfolio, losing steam as far as market share and consumer interest is concerned, and very depleting overall prospects here in the Indian market. That's been the story at the Four Rings for the last, 18 odd months. But finally, things are starting to change, and for the better. It is the start of what could end up being a whole new refreshing outlook from Audi in India. New products will be the highlight of that, and the A6 defines that second coming, if you will. Now, the A6 itself, of course, is also a little bit delayed, but it's finally here and it's very promising. That's something I told you when I drove the car for the first time last year in Europe as well. Now that it's here, what about the India spec? Well, I'll tell you all about that too. The Audi A6 is in its 5th generation, and this has simply got to be the best built, best equipped and best performing one yet. Sure, all new generations are meant to be an improvement over the previous one, but this goes beyond that. The car is credibly the true representation of what it is meant to be, a premium executive sedan that offers exemplary levels of fit and finish, equipment and very sharp, stylish looks. The new A6 has grown marginally over its predecessor and yet looks taut, muscular and poised for performance, and it is. When I first drove the car in Portugal last summer, I came away more than impressed than I had imagined possible. The new A6 was doing it all right. And at the time, we had the impression that India would get the 3-litre V6 petrol, that's the 55 TFSI, and the 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel 40 TDI. But plans and market environment have changed here since, and Audi chose the subsequently introduced 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol-only for India as it moves away from diesel in the coming months. Now, since the beginning of time, relatively speaking, it's always been a certain way. The BMWs were the pure performance drivers' cars. The Mercedes-Benz cars were all about comfort and luxury. And Audi was always striving really hard to find the perfect middle ground so that it can be a little bit of both. And I say trying because it was kind of unsuccessful until now. I have to say that it's a great balance that the new A6 strikes between those two realms. It offers you a fair amount of fun when it comes to driving and performance. So when you're on the road driving the car, yeah, it brings a smile to your face. The different drive modes are very distinct. You put it in dynamic and things are actually a lot of fun. I have to say I would like the steering to be a little bit stiffer in dynamic, but otherwise very precise, great on handling, and yet not quite skimping on luxury or comfort. Though I have to say, the new 5 Series also does not skim on luxury or comfort, but it's still a great balance, good to see from Audi, and certainly something that will make the A6 seem light years ahead of the last car. Yes, the new A6 does everything right. Well, almost. Even during my comprehensive drive last year with several other engine variants, it really had been the light steering that stood out as the only big negative for me. The handling on the India spec car remains just as good, and the power delivery from the 4-cylinder is surprisingly quick. The character of the engine is also extremely refined, and I have to say it feels more powerful than it actually is. The gearbox is also slick and married beautifully to it. The paddle shift works well too. The various drive modes are distinct, like I said, though the car feels light and peppy, even in efficiency mode. Features like cruise control and lane departure warning work quite well and effectively, even in Indian conditions. The 18-inch wheels grip the road well, and while the Indian spec is front-wheel drive, the need for quattro or all-wheel drive is not apparent. The new generation A6 gets a mild hybrid as standard. On the 4-cylinder engines, that is restricted to just a 12-volt system. The mild hybrid recuperates some braking power for use during start-stop, etc. Very distinct and very much like the A8. That's the rear of the car, which has a nice, large, wide stretched, classy upmarket look. The added bit of chrome actually works in this case. The tail light treatment, full LED, also looks really, really sleek and sharp. And yet it's a nice, short, compact boot. Most of the implication of space really comes along the wheelbase of the car. You can see that along the side you get a nice amount of metal, and yet while it's simple, there's no gimmicks there, it kind of works for the car's design. As you come to the front, you start to realize that the A6 of course is evolutionary, as we've told you in our last review as well, and which means that it doesn't really break the mold in terms of trying to do something very new or radical or drastic, and yet it gives you a much sharper looking car than the previous one, because you've got a lot of sharp ridges in the hood that are subtle and yet very edgy. The grille is massive and yet that works. The LED treatment on the lights up front, there's of course matrix LED at the top end, also really works. So the car looks lit, it looks agile, and yet it looks upmarket and classy too. So yeah, I like how the car looks now for sure. The new A6 has also grown marginally, like I said, but grown where it counts. The car's cabin length is up by 21 millimeters. Rear legroom has increased 17 millimeters out of that, and there's 8 millimeters more headroom up front, 11 millimeters at the rear. The car gives you the latest MMI or multimedia interface. The touch screens are split into two. The one above is for all things infotainment and navigation, while the one below is the climate control. The screens have haptic feedback too, which is great, and the system is also very intuitive, very easy to use. Now globally, the A6 takes on a whole host of rivals, from the likes of Lexus, Acura. Well, here in India, of course, it gets kind of limited. You've still got the Jaguar XF for what it's worth. But the BMW 5 Series in many ways defined this segment for the longest time. It was the big benchmark in that space. Of late, that has changed, and especially here in India, that's changed big time, because the car that's run away with the popularity contest is this one. So in dynamic terms, yes, it's the 5 Series that will probably still best the A6 in its current form and avatar, but in every other respect, it's got to still take on the benchmark car, which is the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. It is the bestseller in the space. It's been a huge hit for Mercedes, and don't forget, this is the long wheelbase, which is the big difference between these two cars straight off. Yes, the Mercedes-Benz E-Class has become the bestseller by a mile. Its long wheelbase master stroke guarantees ultimate rear seat comfort, pretty much a baby S-Class. It's 125 millimeters longer than the A6, but the wheelbase is 156 millimeters longer. A neat little touchscreen with your own personalized controls for the rear AC vents with rear AC controls as well. The sunscreen, always welcome, and of course the little vanity mirror. And the part that you already know about, which we've gone on and on about, which is the reclining rear seats and the ample legroom. I mean, these are the things that really define the rear of the E-Class. It becomes the executive to be chauffeured in car so obviously. Oh, wireless phone charging. Let me not forget. Now, you certainly don't get as ample a sense of space back here as you do on the E-Class, but then, you know what? Unlike the last A6, this still feels nice and roomy. The biggest change, the seat back, the comfort of the angle and just the overall contouring and cushioning of the seat. You've almost got this individual seat-like feel at the back for the two rear seats. Though of course, you can put a third passenger in the middle if you do want to. And it is a much heightened sense of comfort compared to the outgoing A6 for sure. You do have the customary screens for saving yourself from the sun on this one too. You even have the one at the back, and you know what, overall the quality and the finish on this car just exudes a huge step up as well. I love the fact that you have individual temperature controls for the back, and again it's a nice sleek touch screen sort of a feel that's been given to it. So haptic controls again, and you can adjust both fan speed and temperature for either side. You've got not one but two USB charging points back here. Overall, I have to say that even though it's over 150 millimeters of difference in the wheelbase itself of the two cars, this certainly by no means comes across as cramped or compromised in any way. So yes, the A6 is not nearly as opulent or roomy as the E-Class, but still gets a decent sense of space in the back. It's also pretty luxurious and well appointed, especially the technology trim, which is the car with me. It gets you the virtual instrument cluster, 4-zone air conditioning, ambient lighting, the Bang & Olufsen sound system and a few other things over the Premium Plus trim. Things like the leather seating, MMI, LED lighting and panoramic sunroof are standard though. And at prices that are significantly lower than the rivals, the car stands out. Though yes, the lower trims on the BMW 5 Series are diesel, and let me remind you again that the E-Class is a larger car. The weak points on the new Audi A6 are the lack of a diesel or an all-powerful engine variant. The latter may follow as a portfolio enhancement at a later stage, but given its prices, equipment and drivability, I am happy to anoint the Audi A6 as a credible and worthy candidate in the premium mid-size sedan segment today. So it does take three to tango in this particular segment, because the 5 Series is definitely the credible rival that also belongs in that comparison. You saw the prices, you also know that the diesel is the one that starts lower, and then you got that really nice powerful petrol at the top, which will, like I said, in performance terms, best the A6 for sure. And even the diesel, very, very refined.